two short ones. Hope that's okay. They're not, they're both animal stories. This is all animal stories. First one is Cave Girl. And I'm just going to launch right into it without any explanation. Bunny! I chased it, running as fast as my little boy legs could, laughing at the fluffy white tail that bounced with every jump. Its ears lay flat on its head as it bounded through the woods, its tiny beige body dodging trees and large rocks. I was still 20 feet back and losing ground when the rabbit darted into a cave. The sun shone in for a few feet, and it was dark after that. I slowed to a stop outside. Maybe it was trapped. Maybe I could catch it and stroke its soft fur. We could be friends. In the hazy gray area beyond the light, I saw the bunny, quivered, clearly terrified, in a girl's hands. She was close to my age, maybe a year older, with short blue-black hair and weird eyes. They were a yellowish green, more yellow than green. She was naked, which was also weird, but it was warm out, so no big deal. I would be naked all the time if Mom and Dad didn't get all worked up about it. Really, there's no better way to spend the summer. I said, "Hi, you caught the bunny." She nodded. Her mouth opened, and I thought she was yawning, but then her chin dropped even more, and it looked like her jaw just broke. Stared. Couldn't help it. Her hair disappeared, like it was growing in reverse. Her feet came together and became one limb. It stretched out to a point, tail. Her arms and body shifted almost like liquid into one long coil, holding the rabbit, squeezing it. The bunny twitched, gasping, inside its scaly, living prison. The girl was all the way snake now, at least 4.5 feet long. She stretched her mouth over the bunny's face, slowly pulling it in with muscles I could see moving along her jaws. Pressure built up in my bladder, and I was afraid. I was afraid I'd wet my pants, but I couldn't turn away. The bunny bulge eased its way through the snake until it stopped about halfway. Tail became legs, arms unfolded, and the snake was once again a girl. She had a big lump in her tummy. She rested her hands on it and smiled at me. I tried to smile back to be polite, but I don't think it worked. It felt sour on my face. I backed slowly away until I was well outside the cave in the warm, comforting sunshine. Then I turned and ran. By the end of the summer, I'd convinced myself that I must have imagined the whole thing. It was, after all, pretty unbelievable. But I stayed well away from that cave, just in case. I didn't tell anyone, though. I came pretty close with Sparky, my big brother. His real name is Robert, of course, but when he was 10, he accidentally set fire to the porch. So he ended up with that nickname, and it kind of stuck. But he was almost a teenager by then and taken to making fun of me for sport. I didn't want to give him any more ammunition. Eventually, what with school starting up and seeing my friends again, I pretty much forgot all about the rabbit and the cave and the girl who was also a snake. When I was 13, I was huge into fantasy games, like both in person and on computer. 5 of us spent once a week rotating houses, rolling up a new character whenever one had died. Christian, the game master, would flawlessly integrate the new one into the party, picking up where we had left off. Kid was a genius storyteller. I convinced my dad to buy me a foam sword with a hard plastic core. It was perfect for full contact LARP combat. All black, so it totally looked like a magic item. It stung to get hit with. I found this out the hard way, but there was no risk of any real damage. My favorite thing around that time was to take the sword out into the woods behind my house to vanquish imaginary monsters. Honestly, I was probably too old for that kind of play, so I only did it when no one else was around. One scorching August afternoon, donned in the armor of cut-off jeans and a tank top, I gathered my weapon, pretending that my skinny body was rippling with muscle. I struck off deep into the woods. "Oh ho!" I said aloud. "Verily, 'tis a cave. I wonder what treasure lies within, and what manner of beast may yet guard it." I mentally patted myself on the back for such excellent in-character monologue, and stepped to the entrance. Sunlight only penetrated a few feet, and I hesitated. Something nagged at me, some memory that swam just below the surface. Tentatively, I stepped closer. There was a smell hanging in the air. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but then it hit me, the reptile house at the zoo. Something moved inside, in the shadows, and I flinched. reflexively bringing the sword to bear in a two-handed grip. She moved into the light. A girl, teenaged, with long blue-black hair spilling across her shoulders. She was unabashedly naked. I looked. Couldn't help it. My face got hot as I looked at her breasts and the hair growing between her legs. It was much fuller than my own peach fuzz. She smiled at me, lips stretching all the way across her face, almost to her ears. It was impossible. A tongue, long, skinny, and pink, flickered forth, tasting the air. The tip was forked. Her hands reached out toward me. Suddenly, it all came back in a rush. The rabbit, how she had turned into a snake and swallowed it whole, how her belly had been distended after she changed back into a girl. I panicked and swung the sword with a mighty battle cry. She jerked back, a startled expression on her face. And I ran. Fast as I could, I ran home and I locked the door behind me, a thing we never did because there was never any need. Shit! Language, my mother said. She was carrying dirty plates into the kitchen. Sorry, Mom. What's that about? I couldn't tell her. How could I explain that there's a freaking Naga living in a cave on our property? And that I'd known about her, but had somehow completely forgotten since I was 7. My favorite character just died. It was a plausible enough lie. She knew how intense I could get about the game. It didn't explain my locking the door, but she seemed to let that go. Well, she said, rinsing the dishes and nodding sympathetically, that is a risk when you play D&D. I still remember being devastated when Rowena, my fighter thief, the 8th level in each, got killed. Played her for years. You know, Mom, you could get back into it. A lot of grown-ups play nowadays. She tisked. When would I have time? She kissed my cheek. Thanks, though. I nodded and went back to my room, hanging the sword on the wall. The display rack was just 2 ordinary stainless steel brackets, but it looked cool up there. My thoughts kept cycling back to the cave. The girl's body gave me a kind of guilty excitement, but it was cooled by the flickering tongue and my memory of what had happened to the rabbit. I was intrigued, confused, and more than a little afraid. There were only 3 weeks left of school. The first free Saturday, I borrowed my parents' binoculars, put on green and brown clothes, and crept into the woods. I stopped well back from the cave entrance. After adjusting the binoculars, it was as if I was right there, just outside. I waited. After a while, I got tired of shifting my weight from one foot to another and sat down in the dirt. Lifting the binocs again, I focused on the cave. There she was, just at the edge of the light, tongue tasting the air, upper body leaning slightly forward, utterly immobile. Does she somehow sense me? That's when I saw the fawn. It was picking its way along, nibbling at leaves about 10 feet to the left of the cave entrance. I held myself as still as possible, slowing my breathing, trying to suppress my runaway impulse. I pressed the rubber eye caps closer to my face. With painstaking slowness, I turned the binoculars back to the cave. The girl was fully snake now, her head slowly, hypnotically swayed in and out of shadow. The fawn stepped into view. She lunged, slamming the tiny deer to the ground, pinning it with her weight. It squealed in protest. Before it could recover, she coiled herself around it, loop after loop. She was so much longer than I'd been here last. I was spellbound, unable to tear myself away, as she unhinged her jaw and inch by inch swallowed that baby deer. After a moment, she slithered into the cave, bulging with her meal. Just inside, still in the sunlight, she morphed back into a girl with pronounced hips and a muscular backside. I imagined what it might be like to cup those buttocks in my hands. She looked over her shoulder, right at me, and winked. I stayed away from the cave for 10 months, only revisiting it in my memories. Plenty of nights I masturbated furiously, imagining the girl's naked body straddling my own. Inevitably, as I climaxed, her forked tongue would appear and her jaw would unhinge. I was ashamed, terrified, and repulsed in roughly equal measure. On the last day of school, I tossed my backpack aside and strode into the woods. I hadn't been able to get her out of my mind, and I couldn't resist anymore. I had to see her again. I was 14 now and had hit a growth spurt. In school, I was on the track team and had built some muscle. I felt strong, capable. I stood outside the cave, arms akimbo, chin raised, defiant. I dared her to come out. She did. In health class, we'd been shown pictures of women who were about to give birth, who were hugely pregnant. That's how she looked, except her face and limbs were lean. Her breasts were bigger than I remembered, but it had been a year, so maybe that was just puberty or something. She studied me with yellowy eyes. Her tongue flicked, just barely passing her lips. Hi. Sinuously, she leaned toward me. I took a half step back. She stopped and straightened up. "Hi," she said. My jaw dropped. "You can talk?" She shrugged. "Can talk." She was just echoing me. Maybe. "I'm Matthew," I said, pointing to my chest. She pointed to herself. "Nagin." She could talk. I can't stop thinking about you," I admitted. "I know. I think about you too." I fumbled, hesitant to ask, but needing to know. Is that, I pointed at her belly, a baby? She laughed, revealing that inhumanly wide jaw, and shook her head. "That is a coyote. I just ate." Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure if the relief was because she wasn't pregnant or because she wasn't hungry. Probably both. "I can't be pregnant. I've never..." She shrugged. "Me either," I said. My phone played Flight of the Valkyries, startling us both. Sorry, that's my mom. Hang on." I texted her back. "We'll pick up bag, home for dinner, busy." Uh-oh. I should go. Stuff to do, you know, I said. "But I'd like to come back, if that's okay, if you want." "I want." "Okay, cool." Tentatively, I took a couple of steps toward her. She watched me. I got close, her eyes sparkled. I hugged her awkwardly around the belly and kissed her lightly on the cheek. She hugged me back, and I could feel the strength she wasn't using. I stepped back. Nagin took my hand and placed it on her breast. I could feel the nipple harden under my palm. I was too surprised to do anything. "When you come back," she said, "I want to touch you. I want you to touch me." I flushed, swallowed. My brain raced in 100 directions. "Okay," I said. For 4 agonizing days, my parents insisted we spend quality time together as a family. God help us every time they read another book on parenting. All our free time was meticulously planned out with group activities we had to pretend to enjoy. Thankfully, by Wednesday, we openly agreed that the whole thing was forced and admitted that no one was having fun. We went back going our separate ways, and my way led straight to the cave. Nagin was waiting for me. Her midsection was flat, with defined abs and a little bump underneath her navel. It was oddly adorable. I looked at her breasts and could vividly remember how it felt to hold one in my hand. "Come," she said, turning to walk into the cave. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans and followed. Her shimmering hair flowed down her back all the way to her tailbone. Below that, the sway of her buttocks was giving me an erection. In the shadows, Nagin stopped and faced me. "Undress." It took forever, as my uncooperative teenage limbs did everything possible to make it awkward. Finally, I was down to my briefs, and after several seconds of psyching myself up, I closed my eyes and dropped them. To apologize for my children for what's about to be read here. Sorry, guys. Cool fingers caressed my shoulders, my chest, my abdomen. They flowed across my hips and down the outside of my thighs. I opened my eyes. Nagin squatted before me, forked tongue darting out, nearly touching the tip of my penis. I shuddered all over. She took me in her hand and stroked me, bringing moisture almost immediately. She rubbed that along the head, coating it. I gasped and gave a little moan. Nagin led me to a surprisingly comfortable pile of leaves and moss and gently pushed me down onto my back. Then, just like in my fantasy, she straddled my lap. She guided me to her, and I watched, entranced, as I slowly disappeared inside. It looked amazing and felt better. We held that pose, me all the way in, for agonizing, wonderful seconds. She began to rock her pelvis, to move up and down. Seeing it, feeling it was too much. The pressure grew intense, and I knew I was beyond stopping. "Wait!" I cried out, but it was too late. I clutched her waist, staring up into her yellow eyes, and exploded inside her. I dropped my head back and tried to catch my breath. She gave my hips an affectionate squeeze, and I smiled dopily at her. Her pupils were vertical slits. Her hair was crawling back into her scalp. She squeezed harder with her thighs, and it hurt. Her body flowed, scaled all over, and writhed around mine. "Please," I gasped. I don't want to die." She hesitated, her face almost fully snake now. "I'm sorry. I need to eat." I was crying. "Please, just let me go. I'll find you food. You don't have to do this." She tightened her coils around me. Black dots danced around my vision. "You knew," she hissed, "what I was. You gave yourself to me anyway." I couldn't reply. I couldn't get enough breath. Her forked tongue played across my face, darted into my mouth, and flicked across my tongue. Nagin's jaw stretched. She wrapped her face around the top of my head. The reptile house stink filled my sinuses. Black bars were closing in on either side. I knew I was about to pass out. My second to last thought was, at least I didn't die a virgin. My last thought that was maybe quality time with my family hadn't been so bad after all. That was longer than I remembered, so I won't read the other one because I don't want to take up that much of your time, but thanks very much.